Hi, everyone. This is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. Be sure to check out our blog, our Facebook group, and subscribe to our channel. And our great sponsors, Phil Italy, Italy Rooting, and Abiativa Casa. And my guest today is Lisa Gagliardo. And Lisa's a proud new mom of I think, 1-month-old baby girl, right, Lisa?
Yes, 1 month.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, all the best of luck to you and the baby and everything. So we're going to go through a little presentation that you put together about your Italian roots. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and you could talk through the presentation.
Right. So I was born and raised on Long Island. My dad is the Italian American one. So he was born and raised between Long Island and Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. To his parents, Francesca de Chico, which is my grandmother, and his father, Joseph Gagliardo, which is my grandfather. All of their parents came from Italy. So my great-grandparents from my grandmother's side, the names are on the screen. They come from small towns in Campania called San Giorgio La Molata and Sacco. And my grandfather's mother comes from Calabria, from a town called Casabona. And his father, we are actually not quite sure where he comes from. That unfortunately has been lost. But we do know that my grandfather's parents met at a gathering in New York City for people who come from Casabona. But when I was looking into names like from that town, I did not find Gagliardo, although I have found a few family, like the Gagliardo name. I have seen some families from Sicily who have this name. So it's possible that he could be Sicilian. It's possible he could be from Casabona, but I haven't gotten direct information from my family.
And that's a beautiful picture, by the way. Do you know what year that is?
This is my grandparents' wedding. I actually have no idea what year it is. I do. Okay, so my grandparents were born in 1932, and I know my grandmother was about 20, either 19 or 20 when she got married. So
I was going to say it looked like early 50s or somewhere around there.
Yeah.
I knew it was later than the 40s mainly because of the dress.
Yes. So around that time. So I'll start off by sharing my family's immigration story. So this story has been passed down from my great-grandmother to my grandmother and then to me. So, but before I explain that, I'll just show you over here that this is from San Giorgio La Molata. These are the identity cards of my great-grandmother and her younger brother, Ferdinando. And truthfully, I cannot read Italian, but I believe it's a card like just saying that they are not registered in the system anymore. I contacted the town San Giorgio La Molata, and they were very nice. I gave the names and they sent these pictures to me, so that was very special. And this picture is a picture of, here is my grandmother. I'm not sure if you can see.
Yeah, no, I can see it.
Yeah. So this is my grandmother, and these are her sisters, and my great-grandmother here, and my great-grandfather here.
And that's great that they sent you those cards. You're really lucky because a lot of them won't do that.
Yeah. So my great-grandmother, as I said, came from San Giorgio La Molata. And when she came on a boat. I believe it was about a 2-hour journey with her younger brother because her mother had died and she had either uncles, I believe uncles or brothers already in New York City who wrote to her and talked to her about coming. So she accepted with her younger brother. And when she reached the immigration processing area, there were health checks. And my great-grandmother said that if you were sick, they would mark you with chalk, as in like you would be marked to be sent back to where you came from. So my great-grandmother was separated from Ferdinando. Ferdinando was marked with chalk and she wasn't.
Wow.
And so my great-grandmother said that she quickly pulled him out from the line. She rubbed the chalk off of him and they walked off together.
Oh,
So
that's fantastic.
yeah, I love telling this story because it really, for me, highlights the determination of this immigrant generation. When they got to New York City, like my grandmother grew up in a tenement on the Lower East Side. And I have a few stories that my grandmother told me. She told me, for one thing, they did not have a phone in their apartment. So, but there was a candy store on, like, close by, because they lived up, I believe, on the 3rd or 4th floor. And on the block, there was a candy store. So when people wanted to reach them, they gave the candy store's number. So whenever they had a call for the Chico, the candy store guy would yell, and then the first floor would yell to the second floor would yell to the 3rd floor, and then someone would come running down to answer the phone. And another story that I have from my grandmother's tenement days is that her mother would make custom dresses from the same roll of fabric. So she would just take this big roll of fabric and cut it the same dress to match each daughter. And my grandmother told me that it wasn't until her oldest sister grew up that she talked to her mom. She's like, you can't keep doing this to us. We need to have some different kind of clothes. We need to fit in with others. And then her mother was like, okay, and she gave in. So I think that's
well,
another...
and you could see the two sisters that they have the same dress.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'd like
yes.
did they know when she rubbed the chalk off, did they know why they marked him? Did they know like what if there was a medical reason or something, or she didn't have any idea?
What I was told is that he was marked like he was not, like his health was not fit to come into the country. I don't know what exactly it was, but the immigration folks just thought he should be sent.
And I know one family that I think one of the girls was 16, and the family stayed and they sent her back.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that incredible? And when my mother's brother came over, because he didn't come over till the 1950s, everybody else was pretty much born here. They had to postpone because my cousin had some kind of liver abnormality or something like that. Today it would be nothing, but they had to postpone coming over until that got resolved.
Wow. Yeah, so other stories that I have enjoyed listening to from my grandmother is that there was one time there was a fair in the neighborhood, and they were poor. They didn't have much money like to pay for the entrance fee. So, and like the my great-grandparents knew that, but they took their children anyway. So my great-grandfather went, and he had a few coins, like he was counting the coins, and while he was counting the coins, he just put it on the entry booth, and they all just walked in, like sneakily. So that's another funny one. Also, my great-grandmother, Fulvia, was known as like a healer in the neighborhood. So my grandmother told me stories of how people would come into her apartment and they would want to know like if they have the evil eye or not. So my grandmother told me this this method that her mother would use, that she would put water and olive oil in a bowl and then use some string. And I don't know exactly, just the idea is like how the olive oil forms in the water will tell you if you have evil eye or not. My great grandmother also did fire cupping, like with a coin, like she would heat up a coin.
I haven't talked to anybody whose ancestor was a healer, but yeah, that's something that you put a string in the olive oil and water and it tells you whether you have the evil eye. Did she say what the cure was for the evil eye, or she didn't know?
I'm sure she herself knew, but my grandmother hasn't told me. And my grandmother told me she would make like the horns with her hand as a way like to deflect the evil eye.
Well, that's why, a
The
lot of
horn
Italians.
necklaces.
Yeah.
That is all I have prepared for this slide. I'll move on here. So here's a picture of my grandparents' wedding. So these are my great-grandparents here. And another anecdote that I'll add about life in New York City is that my great-grandfather owned a construction business. So the name is on here, Gagliardo. I know it's hard to see. And he built his own house in Southampton. So this is how I ended up in Southampton in Long Island. He built like a summer house with some money like that he was able to have from his business. So my grandfather here, he grew up in Brooklyn in the Fort Greene area. I also have a mafia story from my grandfather's family. So I believe that it's my great-grandfather's sister who was actually kidnapped by the Black Hand because it was known like that he had some money and they wanted some money. I believe they were asking for $50. And my great-grandfather didn't give it to them. And she eventually was released, but she spent the rest of her life like scarred by this incident.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. And I have it on my YouTube channel. One of the very first mafia movies is a silent film, and it's exactly that. They kidnapped the kid.
Yeah.
They wanted $1,000 or something like that. The guy was a butcher, I think, and they kidnapped the little girl. It's like, so it's similar. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just funny to me because like my next slide is about like growing up Italian American. So for me, firstly, when people know like that I'm Italian American, the number one thing they ask me is like, oh, do you have family in the mafia? And I always reply, I'm like, no, I don't have family in the mafia. Like my family was victimized by the mafia. So firstly, about growing up Italian American, I'm really blessed to have grown up with the idea that like, yes, we are American, but we do have a connection to another land. We do have a connection to Italy. So this is why I chose this photo of my grandfather. He passed away from dementia about 5 years ago, but when he still had his mental capacity and his physical ability, he loved to create collages of Italy. He liked to look at maps of Italy, and we have here this map here, and also Calabria. So, yeah, again, like something that I really cherish about growing up Italian American is knowing that we belong to Italy in some way. Unfortunately, the language was not passed on, and I think this is very common for Italian Americans because our ancestors wanted to assimilate as fast as possible. So they did not pass on the language. But my grandmother, I actually didn't know this until a few years ago. My grandmother can understand Napolitan dialect. So the dialect that her parents spoke, she can understand it and she can't speak it. So memories that I have, like she will turn on it's called Italian House Party, and it's like a radio station from Boston, I think. I'm not sure if it's still on the air, but for an hour on Sundays, they play like Italian music. And when she can understand the lyrics, she'll tell me and she'll translate. So that's really special. This is me and grandma making Sunday pasta. She's 93 years old. She just turned 93 last week, and she still makes Sunday pasta.
Wow, that's fabulous. Ask her if she
Yeah.
wants to do an interview. I'd love to talk to her.
Yeah,
I'd love to
definitely.
have her on.
Yeah, that would be great.
Now, is that Southampton?
Yeah, so this is their home in Southampton. Yes, these pictures.
Yeah, and I love I see the crucifix and the saints and all of that stuff. That's
Yeah, very Italian American Catholic. Yeah, I grew up going to Catholic school from kindergarten to 8th grade, and then public school. I just remember something. I had an English teacher who was also Italian American, and he was like, you Catholic kids, like I could always spot you, like Catholic school kids, like there's just something different about you.
I went to Catholic grammar school, Catholic high school, and spent part of my time at St. John's. So I got lots of nun stories. That's for sure. You didn't grow up. You probably didn't
No,
have nuns, right?
well,
Or
my
maybe one or
principal
two.
was a nun, and the librarian was a nun. But they kind of mellowed out in my generation, thankfully.
Yeah, well, when I went to school, they still had the full,
Regalia.
habit. Yeah, the
Right.
whole thing. Yeah, they didn't show any of their hair, and they had the thing all the way down to the floor and the long veil and all of that kind of stuff. In the summertime, I could just imagine how hot it must have been for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were an interesting group.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I'm really proud of growing up Italian American. I think just having like this fusion of, I guess, old world traditions. So there are so many things that were not passed down to us as like third generation, fourth generation Italian Americans, but I'm very thankful that the culinary tradition has stayed. So growing up, like having, for example, lasagna on Thanksgiving, in addition to the turkey, having all the sweets, like Italian sweets, strufoli during Christmas.
Yeah, well, your grandmother is roughly the same age as my mother. My mother would be 100 this
Oh,
year.
wow.
So they're from the same generation, more or less.
Yeah. All right. So, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, my grandfather passed away about 5 years ago. And I would say right after he passed away is when I started becoming very curious about my ancestry in Italy. And I did some digging in my grandparents' house where I found this note of Silvio Vittieri. I saw like this name, so this is my great grandmother's last name, and an address in Casabona. So I asked my grandma, like, what is Casabona? Like, and she told me that my grandfather went there about 30, maybe 40 years ago and connected with a relative there, and this is their information. And in this same conversation is when I asked my grandmother about the name of her town, like that her mother came from. Unfortunately, my grandmother was not able to visit her mother's town, but she did tell me that after 30 years of her mother being in the country, I believe 30 or more years, she was able to go back. So her mother like went for a visit with many of her daughters, but my grandmother stayed behind, and she told me that, you know, they were treated like queens, and there was so much food, and they were, you know, welcomed magnificently. And so my grandfather did get the opportunity to go, and I found this on slides. So he actually has an old school like slide machine and a projector. So these are all, I took these from the projector. So like we have like donkeys and wood cutting and just like the scenes of the Calabrian countryside.
That's an old town. You
Yeah.
could see how, I mean, it doesn't look like it's changed at all.
Yeah. Well, this is from like 30 or 40 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Well, I bet you it probably hasn't changed that much since.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something. Those are great pictures.
Yeah. So I found, so my grandfather took both of these pictures of these people, and I actually found a Facebook group of people from Casabona. I posted this on there, and some of them were like, oh yeah, this is like, I know this man, or this is me. Like one of the people's like, oh yeah, this is me. So I
Wow.
thought that was really funny, just to have these connections through time and through like a connection to a place.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.co. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co.
Wow. So that's like caves. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the last picture I have on the slide. So as I was connecting with people from Casabona, I connected with someone and I asked them like, oh, do you happen to know anyone with the Vittieri last name or any relatives? Yeah. I thought it was very nice what he replied back to me. He's like, you know, we're all related in this town. Like, you don't have to have like the same last name. You know, we're all related. Like, we're all cousins. We have a very close relationship. So when I started posting on these groups, like from Casabona and also from San Giorgio La Molata, I received very warm welcome. And so I would love to visit one day. So that's my next travel goal.
Yeah, you'd love it there if you know, when you get to go, because it's a whole different feeling when you go to the hometown. You know, you and I could tell something. It's like me. Something strikes you. For me, it took longer, but something strikes you and makes you want to find this out and go back and understand the ancestors and all of that. I can't put my finger on it. Do you know how many people live in this town today?
I don't. I mean, It's a small, small town. It
Yeah.
must maybe like 5,000 or less. I really don't know.
I bet you it's probably less than that because I could see it's one of those mountaintop places in Calabria where just, there's no work anymore
Yeah,
in these places.
this is true. This is true. And a part of my journey of like looking back into my roots was also learning more about what drove the mass immigration from Italy, specifically southern Italy, Calabria, Sicily, and just learning about the inequality where the south of Italy just did not have the same social support and infrastructure that the other parts of Italy perhaps had. For example, I know that in Casabona, it took them a while to have running water like inside of the home.
What happened was after they did the unification, is that the whole fiefdom structure with the nobility just collapsed because they didn't own the land anymore, and the peasants, they couldn't farm the land because there was nobody taking care of it, and that's really a lot of that has to do with why they all had to leave because they couldn't farm, there was no work,
Yeah,
and the North really stuck it to the South when they did that. So
yeah, this is
there's
true.
there's people today who still
Oh
feel
yeah,
bitter
have
about
this
that,
division. Yeah, definitely.
but it is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, even until today, like caring for the land, at least like specifically in Casabona, there are olive trees. And so during the olive harvest season, I'm able to see pictures of people going out, like harvesting the olives. I've seen pictures of like figs, like fresh
Mm.
figs from the land. So it's, and it's also all of this knowledge that our ancestors lost, when they came to America. Like their whole way of life just radically shifted, and a lot of ancestral knowledge was lost.
Well, yeah, for the most part, some did keep in touch, and my father's mother, she kept in touch with, because she had her whole family was there, and she kept in touch.
Right.
But I didn't know, I didn't find this out until later on that she was in touch with them until she died, and then even my father's older sister stayed in touch with them until she died.
Oh, that's amazing.
But nobody ever said anything. I had
Yeah.
no idea. I had to find this out for myself.
Yeah.
But it's that's the thing that makes me nuts because they knew about it and nobody said anything. And my mother's family, they all had come, so there were probably some distant cousins in there. But when we went, well, I guess it's almost 3 years now. Yeah, it's almost 3 years. When we went, I met my father's first cousins are still alive. They're in their 90s. They're like like your grandmother's age. I had no
Wow.
idea these women existed.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I saw that paper of Silvio Viteri, it just made me think about like the lives that were left behind and how like the trajectory just became so different. Like for those that stayed and those who left.
I think that those who stayed, I'm guessing here a little bit, but I think those who stayed, they had it rough, and then they had to go through the war and all of that kind of stuff. Most of my cousins that are there now, like I said, my dad's first cousins are older, but some of my second cousins and that, they're in Puglia, they're in Campania. I mean, they've all done pretty well. Even in one of the smaller mountain towns that we went to, well, a couple of them. Everybody was was happy. They may not be wealthy, but they have something that we don't have. And they have that, from the way I saw it and felt it, they have that closeness. They have fresh food, that's for
Yeah,
sure. They don't have all the
that's
chemicals in their
important.
food. Oh, wait till you taste the olive oil in Italy. Oh, you're going to be,
Oh, yeah.
you're going to be amazed. But we went to one town, it was, there's probably 1,000 people in this town. And, everything that they had laid out, the picnic style there was nothing wrapped in plastic. It was all stuff that they made: the ham, the cheese, the bread, the wine, the olive oil, everything was all made fresh. So, there's a richness there. I mean, I just wish I knew what I knew now years ago, because I think we would have tried to at least have some kind of vacation home there or something like that, because it is beautiful. And people who move there, some people say it's great and it's wonderful. Others say it's great and it's wonderful, but it's tough adjusting when you come from America. Well, I want to ask you two questions. One is, how far back have you been able to go? Have you been able to go back further than your great-grandparents?
So that's a great question, because Miriam wants to answer too.
I was thinking that she wants to answer the question.
Yeah, she's part of the next generation of Italian Americans.
Yeah.
So being a part of the Italian ancestry groups on Facebook, I'm able to find my great-grandmother's mother, her birth certificate. Her name was Rosa Tratto. I really cannot, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's really special, like presenting this information to my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother was like, oh, like my grandmother's name was Rosa. Like I never knew that. And like showing her pictures, for example, of San Giorgio La Molata, like, oh wow. She'd say stuff like, would you look at that? That's beautiful. That's nice. And she, like, I think that's like the most rewarding part of this ancestry work, is being able to take it back to my grandmother and to show her things that maybe she would not have known or seen otherwise.
Yeah, that is great. I mean, my father had passed away already, and his family history is incredible. But I used to, tell my mother things, and she would be this, are you sure? Are you sure about that? I said, Ma,
Yeah.
I've found, I have the records that say that this is this one's father, and this one's father, and this one's father. My mother's hometown, Torito, I was really lucky there because they have everything filmed on the Antonati. So I was able to go back to her whole family back to like 1750.
How amazing.
I was pretty lucky there. And then my father's father, I finally had to hire somebody to help me because I couldn't find, they would live in Naples, and there's millions of records. So I finally got somebody to help me with that. But I still, people, that's why it's good. I always tell people, if they ask, I say, go to Facebook, look for the hometown. You'll be surprised. Yeah. Because I just, a couple of months ago, I got contacted by somebody that said, I'm your cousin. And he sent me a picture that my grandmother had sent to his grandmother. And I had seen the picture before, but I knew it wasn't one that I posted because the corner was ripped off, right? And I said, well, who are you? And I forgot. There was an obituary here in New Jersey from the 1920s that said how many siblings my uncle, my grandfather had in Italy. But I forgot. But only he and his brother had come, and there were 4 other siblings in Italy that, again, I never knew out. And I mean, after 15 years of doing this guy comes out and says, I'm your cousin. So you never know when they're going to pop up,
Yeah. That's really special.
So now this was your father's. Is your mother's family Italian? And no, she's
No, no, she's not. I identify as Italian American, even though like only my dad is, because I really grew up around the culture.
Sure.
I mean, I grew
Yeah.
up having Sunday dinner, like seeing my grandparents, listening to Andrea Bocelli on the weekend. Like, I would wake up on the weekend, my dad is making breakfast and playing Andrea Bocelli, even though we don't understand anything he says, but we can sing it like verbatim.
Oh, that's cool. That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
And well, this has been fascinating. I love all the photos. I love that. I love the story about the people coming to see if they have the evil eye or not. That's
Yeah.
fascinating to me. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And like I said, if your grandmother wants to be on, just
Yeah,
let me know. I'd love to have her on.
I'm definitely gonna pose that to her.
Yeah, we could compare notes. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate